Good morning. I feel kind of funny doing this. I wish y'all were here. I miss y'all not being here. We started to get a picture of everybody that comes, a big picture, and have it blowed up and put it in the pews where you normally sit, like they do down at Grace Chapel. Then I heard from Grace Chapel, and they said that there's a bunch of people called and said somebody was sitting in their seat, so we decided not to do that. A lot of y'all are probably wondering what's going on with this coronavirus and all this lockdown and all that stuff. Us Christians, we should have an advantage in this thing because we got a book that lays out how it all ends. And we shouldn't be worried. A lot of folks are scared, worried. I'm going to kind of go through what's going on and then take a look at how we ought to react to it and what God thinks about it. First place, a lot of people gripe because the media has abandoned their job and stopped reporting fair and square and all that stuff. Don't be surprised because the media belongs to Satan. Jesus said it belonged to Satan, fair and square. He did. It's of this world. And Jesus called Satan the God of this world, so everything in this world belongs to Satan legally till that seventh seal is broke. Now, here we was going along fine, everything going smooth, and then suddenly this thing fell in our lap, this coronavirus outbreak. Now bear with me while I go through this. One day in January, the news was full of nothing but Democrats running for president and bashing Trump. And the next day, we're all going to die from this horrible new plague. So what happened? Sometime back in December, a guy bought a bat in a Chinese open-air animal market in Hunan province and got sick. Then he passed it on to 41 other people before he even knew he was sick. And then on December 31st, China informed the World Health Organization about 41 people with a mysterious pneumonia connected to that Hunan seafood wholesale market. The next day, January 1st, the Hunan market shuts down. On a week later, January the 7th, Chinese doctors identified it as a new type of an old virus, the coronavirus. 4 days after that, China records its first death. And then 2 days later, on January 13th, the first coronavirus case outside of China is reported in Thailand. January the 20th, the first U.S. case is reported. It was a 35-year-old man in Snohomish County, Washington. January 23rd, that Hunan is placed under quarantine. 7 days later, the World Health Organization, on January 30th, declared a global public health emergency. The next day, President Trump banned all foreigners from entering the United States if they had been in China within 2 weeks. February the 2nd, the first death outside of China is recorded in the Philippines. February the 8th, the first U.S. citizen dies of coronavirus in Wuhan. February the 9th, the death toll in China exceeds the 2002 SARS epidemic with 811 deaths. February 11th, the World Health Organization announces the name of the coronavirus will be COVID-19. All right, and February the 19th, it breaks out in Iran. February the 21st, it breaks out in Italy. February the 29th, the United States reports its first death on American soil. March 3rd, Spain breaks out in Spain. March the 8th, Italy puts all its 60 million people on lockdown. 3 days later, March 11th, the World Health Organization declared a pandemic, a plague. Same day, President Trump bans travel from 26 European countries. March 13th, he declares a national emergency over it. March 19th, China said there was no new infections for the first time since it all started. March 23rd, New York becomes the center of cases in the United States with 21,000 cases. March 26th, the United States had 82,000 cases, the highest in the world. March 27th, Italy reports the highest single-day death toll of 919. March 31st, more than a third of the whole world's population is locked down. 35 states in the U.S. have stay-at-home orders. All right, April the 2nd. Now these numbers go back to April the 2nd, but there was 216,722 people infected and 5,137 people died in the United States. I'm going to make a little commentary here now about that. The center of this epidemic, pandemic, whatever you want to call it, is pretty much sanctuary states. New York State with 2,219 cases. These are all sanctuary states. New Jersey, 355, Michigan, 337, Louisiana, well, New Orleans, 273, and Washington State, 254. For 3,438 cases in those 5 areas. They're all sanctuary states. The rest of the country has less than half that number. Anyway, it's all pretty scary stuff when they tell you that you can get sick and not even know it, and you can die before you realize it. You can smother to death. And they just keep pounding it and preaching it on the TV. And I've noticed one thing about it: the fear of this virus is a whole lot more contagious than the virus itself. Satan's media is deliberately using fear to create panic and to throw up a smokescreen to further their satanic agenda. Now, it's a lot like, a friend of mine used to have chickens up on the mountain, and I used to imagine when I was a boy what it'd be like to throw a firecracker in that hen house and watch them chickens. Well, this fear and this panic that the media has created is a whole lot like throwing a firecracker in a chicken house. It'd be easy to start a stampede, but you're not going to stop it till them chickens feel safe. I want to put this thing in a little bit of perspective. And I know you've heard this, comparing the flu and the Chinese virus. The annual influenza infections in the United States is 46 million people get the flu in the United States. 45,000 of them normally die. So far, there's 217,000 people got this Chinese virus, and 5,000 have died from it. So how come are we having all this panic and hysteria over some kind of virus that doesn't cause a tenth as much damage as the flu? Well, the doctor that's the head of the Centers for Disease Control, here's the reason he gave why we're panicking and locking the country down. We know what to expect from the flu. That was his answer. So, what does God want us to do? What does God want us to do? Number one, He wants us to obey the government. The president has got a delicate balancing act on his hand, trying to control this virus and not let too many people get killed without causing too much damage to the economy. Well, in Romans 13, verse 1, regardless of what you think about what they're doing, Romans 13:1 says, "Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God, and whosoever therefore resisteth the power resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. So, the government wants you to stay home, stay 6 foot away from other folks, and wash your hands. Sounds reasonable to me for a little while. Well, everybody's got conspiracy theories. There's 100 different conspiracy theories out there. And I'm going to take a look at one or two of them and see what you think about this. Number one, I kind of like this one. God is making us all sit in the corner in a timeout till we can learn to get along with each other. I like it. God is punishing America for her sins of abortion, sexual perversion, promiscuity, illegal drug use, violence, and turning away from God. Now, let's talk about the news media. Got conspiracies about the news media. It is a fact, in my mind, that the news media has abandoned its number one job of speaking the truth to power. And it has become an enemy of the United States. They're nonstop, 24/7, panicky reporting on this virus. If you'll think about it for a minute, it's a real convenient excuse for failing to report on some stuff like flawed Democratic presidential candidates. How long has it been since you heard anything on the news about Joe Biden's touchy-feely past, his worsening dementia, or his blatant corruption? And you've probably never heard anything about Bernie Sanders' plans for a communist America. Okay, that's the news. The Democrats, I've heard people say that the Democrats plan to steal the November election by making everybody vote by mail. Oh, you can trust them. They wouldn't lose no ballots or steal no ballots or stuff no ballot boxes. No, you don't have to worry about that. And then my favorite conspiracy, George Soros made this virus in one of his labs to bring down America. Now, it's true that he wants to bring down America. I don't think he's smart enough to make this virus. But anyway, his plan comes right out of the book that Saul Alinsky wrote, How to Be a Radical. And in history, this pattern is always the same. Number one is economic collapse. You do something to make the economy collapse that'll give the government the ability to implement extreme control and censorship in our country. If they're able to do that, they can stop this, they call it the Trump populist revolution, and they can just stop it dead in its tracks and get him out of office. Then you have a mass casualty event. When you combine the economic collapse with the mass casualty events like a plague, that allows martial law and a lot of other extreme measures. Step number 3, you isolate people for their own protection. Step number 4, you use people for free labor. We hadn't got that far yet. And then step 5, you start exterminating the undesirables, the ones that won't go along. And in this case, guess who the undesirables are? You are. Step number 6, World War III. And then step 7, a new world order. All 7 of those steps are supported by history. But sometimes we got to remind ourselves who we're fighting and what his agenda is. I got one more here. The Rockefeller Foundation has backed it. U.S. presidents all the way back before George Bush. And the foundation backed Hillary Clinton against Donald Trump and lost. And they're mad. All right, crashing the economy. The coronavirus lockdown is intended to crash the economy and deprive Trump of one of his biggest bragging points and to weaken us to make a communist takeover easier. I don't know. To usher in Satan's one world government. Now, A lot of people get wild-eyed and panicking when you start talking about seeing stuff leading towards a one-world government. I bet you did not know this, though. The Bible does not mention a one-world government. It's not in there. They don't mention a one-world currency. But there's plenty of evidence to suggest that they're both going to exist under the rule of the man of sin that we call the Antichrist in the last days. In Revelation 13:1, John sees the beast, also called Antichrist, rising out of the sea with 7 heads and 10 horns. When you put that together with Daniel 7:16 through 24, it's pretty clear that there's some kind of world system under the beast. He is the most powerful horn who will defeat the other horns and begin to wage war against Christians. A 10-nation confederacy is described in Daniel 2, verses 41 and 42, where the final world government is made up of 10 countries, represented by the 10 toes of Nebuchadnezzar's statue. Whoever the 10 are and however they come to power, the Bible is clear that the beast will either destroy them or reduce their power to nothing more than just figureheads. They'll end up doing whatever he tells them to. Revelation 13 verse 2 says the ruler of this vast empire will have power and great authority given to him by Satan himself. Revelation 13:3 and 4 says he is followed by and receives worship from all the world, and has authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation in Revelation 13, verse 7. So, it makes sense to assume that he's the leader of a one-world government which is recognized all over the world, over all other governments. And it's kind of hard to figure why all these different nations of the world would willingly give up their power to a single ruler until you realize all the disasters and plagues that are described in the seal and the trumpet judgments of Revelations, chapters 6 through 11, will be so bad, they'll be so devastating, and they'll cause so much global unrest and horror and everything that people will accept anybody who promises some relief. All right? And if you ever doubted that he'd be able to do that, look how quick we've given our freedom up over just this little coronavirus thing. That's how easy it is. Just let them start talking about it and panic everybody. Once the Antichrist is in power, him and Satan, who's the power behind him, will establish absolute control over everybody on earth. Kind of like when you're afraid to get in your car and drive to the store now. Isaiah 14:12 through 14 says that the reason he's doing all this is because he wants you to worship him. He's wanted worship ever since he got thrown out of heaven. That's all he's after, is your worship. He tried to get Jesus to fall down and worship him. Said he'd give him everything if he'd just fall down and worship him. All right, now I'm going to talk about a one-world currency here. People talking about chips getting put in their hands and everything like that. One day, they will accomplish a one-world currency. And in Revelation 13, verses 16 and 17, it talks about some kind of mark or something which will be required for you to be able to buy and sell. That means if you refuse to take that mark, you won't be able to buy food. You won't be able to buy clothes. You won't be able to buy no necessities of life. Most people are going to accept that mark just to survive. There's been a lot of guessing today about how that mark going to work, but just the technology that exists today, they could do that pretty easy. They put a little chip in your hand, whatever, put a little barcode on you somewhere. And here, just 2 days ago, I saw on the news that the United Nations has again proposed to replace all currencies with one new global currency. CBS News said that the United States would like the dollar, the euro, the yen, and all other national currencies to be replaced by one new global currency. Daniel 7:23 said, thus he said, the fourth beast, which is what we're talking about, shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. Now, all that stuff, it's easy when you start thinking about all that stuff. You see the stuff going on in the world. It's easy for us as Christians to start getting a little edgy, a little nervous, a little scared. Don't worry. Here's how that's going to end up for him. Psalm chapter 2, verse 1. Why do the heathen rage, and the people imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. He that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh. The Lord shall have them in derision. Then shall he speak unto them in his wrath, and vex them in his sore displeasure. God thinks it's funny. Daniel 2, verse 44. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Luke 9:25, whenever you're standing there wondering if you get left behind in the rapture or however this comes about, you're standing there figuring whether you need to take that mark or whether you need to get that little chip implanted or whatever. Luke 9:25 got some advice for you. For what is a man advantaged if he gain the whole world and lose himself or be cast away? Now, these conspiracy theories, they like to make fun of them, and those smart aleck liberal commentators and stuff like to say we're fools for coming up with these conspiracy theories, but they're all a little bit right, partially. But they're missing the point. The point, George Soros is not behind all these conspiracies. Satan is behind all these conspiracies. But don't forget, behind Satan is the hand of God, stopping him where he don't want him to go. God can use a plague like this coronavirus. Outbreaks of diseases like that have made some people ask, why, God, why are you allowing this to happen? Why are you causing this? Why do you cause plagues and diseases? Is this a sign of the end times? Now, the Old Testament describes a lot of times that God brought plagues and diseases on his people and on his enemies both. And the reason he done it was to make you see my power. Exodus 9:14 and 16. He used the plagues, diseases on Egypt to free the Israelites from their bondage, and he spared his people from being affected by them. That's in Exodus 12:13. He showed he was in complete control over all these diseases, afflictions, plagues, and all this other stuff. Now, God also warned his people of the consequences of disobedience to his law, including plagues. In Leviticus 26:21 through 25, on 2 occasions God destroyed thousands of people for various acts of disobedience. Look at Numbers 16:49 and 25 verse 9. After God gave Moses the law, He commanded the people to obey it or suffer the consequences, including that something that sounds an awful lot like that old Ebola virus. The Lord, this is Deuteronomy 28:22. The Lord will strike you with a wasting disease, with fever and inflammation, which will plague you until you perish. That's just a few examples of a bunch of plagues that God caused. But I thought God was loving and merciful. Well, sometimes it's hard to imagine our loving and merciful God displaying such wrath and anger towards His people. But God's punishments always have one goal in mind: repentance and restoration. In 2 Chronicles 7:13 and 14, God said to Solomon, "When I shut up the heavens so there's no rain, or command locusts to devour the land, or send a plague among my people, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land." God has been known to use disasters and plagues to draw us closer to Him, to bring about our repentance and give us a genuine desire to come to Him the same way a little child comes to its father. Now, Jesus healed every kind of disease in the New Testament, as well as plagues, wherever He went. Matthew 9:35, Matthew 10 verse 1, Mark 3:10. God uses plagues and disease to show His power. Jesus healed plagues and disease to show His power, to prove He truly was the Son of God. And then He gave the same healing power to His disciples to verify that they were from God. In Luke 9 verse 1. God still allows us to get sick for His own purposes, but sometimes disease, even a worldwide plague like this, are just the results of living in a fallen world. There's no way to tell whether or not a plague has a specific spiritual cause. But we do know that God has complete control over all things. Romans 11:36. And He's going to work all of this stuff together for the good of those who know and love Him. Romans 8:28. And by the way, this little bump in the road that we're going through right now is just a small foretaste of some of the plagues that are going to be part of the end times. The two witnesses from God in Revelation 11 verse 6 will have the power to strike the earth with every kind of plague anytime they want to. 7 angels will wield 7 different plagues in a series of final judgments described in Revelation 16. Now, the appearance of this virus might not be tied to some judgment of sin. It could just be the result, like I said, of living in a fallen world. None of us know when Jesus is coming back. And we've got to be careful about saying that something like this is proof that we're living in the end times. For those who do not know Jesus Christ as Savior, diseases should be a reminder that life on earth can be gone like that. As bad as these plagues are, hell's going to be a lot worse. Thank God we have the assurance of salvation and the hope of eternity because of the blood of Christ shed on the cross for us. So how should we respond to this disease? Don't panic. That's first. God's in control. The Bible says something to the effect of, fear not. Over 300 times from cover to cover. Number 2, be wise. Take reasonable steps to avoid the disease and to protect the people of your family. Third, look for opportunities for ministry. Most of the time when somebody's scared they're about to die, They're more willing to talk about their eternal security. It's a time to be bold and be compassionate in your sharing of the gospel, always speaking the truth in compassion. That's Ephesians 4:15. And keep your head up. We're on the winning team. Hope to see y'all next week. Thank you.